Can you tell me, maybe first of all, what's your connection with Aaron? Why are you in Whiting Bay?
I can, yes, sure. We came to Anne for many years before we came to Whiting Bay. What a confession to make. But at that stage, my lovely wife on my extreme right, her cousin owned a house in Sandbraes, and they made it available for us anytime we wanted. However, sadly, due to the death of her husband, she decided to move in full time, and we had to look for somewhere else. I didn't have much to do with that because I was working hard, as all good people do, as you know. And my young and exceptionally beautiful bride did all the work because she wasn't working at that time. What that meant was, and little did I know it at the time, that she had total freedom. I was looking for some sort of mini castle with an acre or two, you know, and she professed to being more sensible than me. And so she said to me one day, I found the perfect house. I said, tell me about the castle. She said, no, it's not a castle. I said, well, tell me about the grounds. She said, no, there aren't any grounds. There's just a couple of wee postage stamps, a front garden. I said, where is it? Oh, it's a place you'll never have heard of called Sandbraes. And I said, right. So she took me down to show me the house, which at that time was owned by the Milligans, who Joe will remember well.
Yes, indeed.
And they were selling because Major Milligan had died and the lovely Mrs. Milligan was selling along with her two sons. So I went down, and she obviously, but I only realised it later, was in cahoots with my bride about selling me this house.
Caught.
Because I said to Aileen, okay, tell me about the house, if there's no ground. She said, there are 2 bathrooms, and the one downstairs has got a 6'6" bath, a peat fire, and a bookcase. To me, you could get no closer to heaven than that concept of a bathroom.
So can you confirm this story?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
And Jill, your connection with Whiting Bay?
Well, I married Bobby Shand, and Bobby Shand had always come to Whiting Bay because he was very friendly with the Millers. And I, all my life, had gone to Sannox from the time I was born. But once we got married, you understand that I came to Whiting Bay. And it was a very good swap, though I loved Sannox too.
And when did you move to Whiting Bay? What was your initial
Well,
visit?
1948. But we didn't stay there all the time. We stayed in Glasgow, but it would be about, and then we got Invermay Hotel, but it would really be 1970 or so before we came to stay permanently in Whiting Bay. You know, we were in Glasgow and backwards and forwards.
So did you run
We had Invermay.
Hotel.
We had Invermay for about 20 years.
20 years.
And then we retired just along the road. It was Margaret and John Fleming's house. He built the house I'm in, and they had Canberra before that, and when they retired they built this house, Middleway, which is right on the main road, and we bought it when we retired. So that's it.
So you're across from
Yes, so but
Springfields.
Bobby always came to Whiting Bay because he was very friendly with the Millers, and so I gave up Sannox.
Quite right, to be honest.
Yes,
He came
but
to
that's
Bedford
where I'm
Village.
ending up, and he's there now.
And we won't mention Lamash Bill that you spoke about earlier.
Leave it all out.
So, Bill, you, I understand, were travelling back and forward before you retired, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We bought the house in 1972, but our connection goes a lot further back. Aileen would be able to tell you that her parents actually met in Whiting Bay.
Can you tell us, Aileen?
Yeah, sure. Yes, Whiting Bay was a name that had obviously been in my life really long before I was born, although I didn't know it at that time, because my father and mother did meet here in the late 20s, early 30s. They got married in 1938, but they obviously spent summers here for a lot of years. My mother used to pitch her tent up at Broomhill where the Kerrs lived and leave it there from the beginning of the summer to the end, travelling backwards and forwards to Glasgow to where she was working. My father, I think his family stayed in Bourtry Bank up on the high road, but certainly in the Knocknakelly area. And there was a big crowd of people came down from Glasgow or over from the Ayrshire. And that was how they met. They brought me here when I was 3 months old, apparently. in 1939, and we stayed in a wee cottage at the Smithy, which I was reliably informed by my mother was dark and dank, but served its purpose beautifully. After that, I have a photograph of my sister and I in, I think, 1942, sitting on the lawn at Loudon with a flagpole behind us, and the house that we now live in, Tyandara, across the field, is in the background, and I find that quite kind of prophetic in a way. And since we came over, as Bill explained, to Whiting Bay instead of Longnash, our family kind of had their formative holiday years here, fishing in the burn, out in a boat, playing football in the field, doing whatever. Culminated in our daughter marrying an Arden farmer, and she now lives down at the south end. But that's our kind of potted history.
And so Sandbraes area is obviously, it is such a beautiful area.
Yes.
I think for people in Whiting Bay, it's got many memories
Yes.
of events going on down there.
Yes.
What's your own particular memories of Sandbraes?
Well, I think there's two, David. The first one, I led into the bit of Aileen taking to see the house which we now live in, and being in cahoots with Daisy Milligan, who owned the house, and telling me all about this marvellous. And I was taken in, as one always is by women, because as soon as I went to the door, Daisy said to me, "Hikastai," in the Gaelic. So she knew, and I thought, I didn't even think at that time, because women are so far ahead of us. So I went in and she said, "Stroop, a hen, a sandwich and a cup of tea beside the fire." And we went on, and she said, "Oh, first I'll take you to see the bathroom." So I went in to see this bathroom. There it was, full of steaming water, a most beautiful scent of peat smoke, and the bookcase as advertised. I may tell you, because this is worth finishing, that within 6 months I discovered that Aileen had realised that we needed a very big freezer indeed. I mean the big chest freezers, you know, because in those days you could get all the fish you wanted for nothing just by catching them, and getting venison, because the farmer shot the venison, couldn't use it all when it went on to the land, etc. Anyway, to cut the story short, what that meant was that there was only one room capable of holding this, which was the downstairs bathroom. And if you had a freezer, you couldn't have a fire. And if you couldn't have a fire the whole time...
So you lost.
I warned my children well about the duplicity of women after that. Afterwards, Aileen said to me, "What did you think of the house?" I said, "I thought it was wonderful," forgetting entirely that I'd only seen 2 rooms, the aforesaid bathroom and the lounge. But one of the lovely things about going to live in Sandbraes, one of my mates was an Englishman who always told me the distinction in England between a village and a hamlet was that a village had a church and a hamlet didn't. So I have therefore been able, since then, to welcome the people from the hamlet of Whiting Bay to the village of Sandbraes. I love it. It was, as you know, a row of farm labourers' cottages, 1 story only. And I have photographs of them going back to the 1800s. And they are very tiny, and in fact 2 of them aren't there at all. So I became fascinated by the history of the thing. Having been in the legal profession, I was able to understand about doing a search on the thing and finding out how all the old deeds went back, and discovered exactly where I'd been, and discovered the land round about had been a farm. So we were living
on the actual farm?
Yes, it was a farm, and these were the cottages given to the labourers.
And do you know the farm name at all?
No. The only thing I know is that the house, when we bought it, was called Thendara, and I knew that couldn't be right, but in Gaelic it sounded too close to Tyandara for it not to be right. And when I did a search of the very early few dispositions and few contract, there it was, Tyandara, meaning the house of the oak tree.
Oh, right. And is there an oak tree there just now?
No. The 2 oak trees grew on the land of the corner house, whose name I forget, is owned by the two ladies.
I think it's Sandbraes Lodge or something like that. Sandbraes House.
The house right on the main road. And it had two huge oak trees, which Joe will well remember. And the previous owners to the new ladies actually cut the trees down because they perceived them to be dangerous as they slightly overhung the dip down into the house, and they foresaw the roof getting mashed by these, so they cut them down. But that is why our house is called Tyndara.
Your other memory, Bill, that you spoke about?
Of?
You said you had two memories, that you'd one of...
One was my wife's duplicity, which I've been into in some detail. If I told you more, I would suggest it might shame somebody, but it doesn't. It was, as you well know, being a man, a signal victory for the female sex.
One of my memories of Whiting Bay is the two shops that we had. There was one down in the Hollow, I can't remember the name of it.
That's the house I'm talking about now.
And also the shop that's currently there.
Yes, that's quite about.
I would embarrass one of our sons desperately if I told you that one down in the Hollow, he and one of his pals, when they were about 6 or something, were followed back out the Hollow up to the house by the owner to say, "Come back and pay for your sweeties." Being at that age, they thought that that was perfectly all right, just to go to the house next door and get some sweeties. However, it was.
And if you had one favourite, Jill, we'll ask you this: if you had one favourite memory of Whiting Bay, or in particular Sandbraes, what do you think it would be?
I really couldn't tell you. I think it would be the beach, because I spent hours on the beach with my children, where my husband was up helping Johnny and Willie Kelso on the farm because he didn't like the beach. So I would say it would be the beach and going in swimming, because I swam every day until last year. And so that is an abiding memory of Sandbraes. And you couldn't swim really except at the jetty further along. Sandbraes was the place to swim. So that's my memory of Whiting Bay. Yes.
Aileen, what's your favourite memory of Sandbraes?
Just lovely times down in the holidays with the children, where you could happily let them go across to the swings or down to the beach, knowing that even if you couldn't see them, there were plenty of other people like Harold Spears in particular, who watched our boys going out in the wee rowing boat and told me not to worry about it. He had his telescope on them no matter where they were, and it just was such a friendly, happy place, and an open view from our house right to, oh yes, wonderful.
I think what you've just said is so true. I think one of my memories is knowing my parents would know what I'd done when I'd been out before I got home.
Yes.
So
yes, on that point I can tell you a very interesting anecdote, which is, as has been said, it is a lovely community and people do look out for each other, if there's something needs to be done. And I had taken Aileen up to the golf club, and I was only there for 10 minutes, and I got 3 telephone calls to tell me that one of my sons, who was well underage, had been seen driving my car along the village.
This is the other son, I can tell you. They both had their histories, dark histories.
But they were astonished to come when I came home and said, "What are you doing driving that car?" At how I knew. I said, "Listen, you're in a place where everybody looks after everybody else, but it also means they've got an eye on you guys, so don't get up to any tricks."
And Bill, what does Sandbraes mean to you?
Particularly, I think, acknowledging now at last, having been a bit jokey about my wife's choice, that it was the perfect choice. First of all, if you have young children, as we had, you had the playing fields, you had the beach. And then a girl called Ruth Murphy, practically as a one-woman campaign, built the swings and roundabout and all the stuff that you see now as a smaller children's playground. So the older children could play football, play whatever they wanted, and as Aileen said, they were as safe as houses. I was in our house, I think, for about 10 years before I thought, I wouldn't move to anywhere else in Anne. This is absolutely superb. And one day, a fellow, as happens, knocked on my door and offered to buy the house from me. I said, it's not for sale. He said, but I would give you so much, which was a lot of money. And sounded like cheap money, that, didn't it? And I said to him, look, if you give me a lot of money, I go and buy a house. I've already got a house. I like it. I don't want to be anywhere else. So, absolutely no question. It won't happen. There's no interest in selling. I fell in love with it, and I loved it and loved it forever. It was just a wonderful place. And then grandchildren. Our grandchildren, 5 of whom you may know live in the South End. Fiona McMaster is our daughter. And grandchildren will come up and play in the fields in the same way when they were wee. Now they're running their farm and doing their father out of a job, of course. And our other grandchildren who lived in England at that time used to be desperate to get up. And what has been touching in a way is that they have fallen in love with Sandbraes. And Donald, our youngest fella's 2 sons, are planning to buy in Anne. And the 3 girls of our middle son Angus are here most of the time, or some of the time on holiday, and absolutely adore it. I think it's a fabulous place to be. So what happier memories could you have than to be in a place which attracts your children and your grandchildren to be with you full time? Is marvellous.
So your good lady made the best decision ever for you?
Well, that was her second best.
Exaggeration.
I won't ask what the first was, will I?
Well, we're married, aren't we?
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Sorry, Joe.
Just before we go, nobody has mentioned at all at any time an amazing lady that stayed at Hazelbank up the hill at Sandbraes, Alexis Stewart. And she had a boarding house for years and years and years and was related to nearly everybody in Whiting Bay. And she was quite memorable, and although folks won't remember her now, she was a person who made Whiting Bay what it is today, because everybody knew Lexi, and she was so kind, and folks came year and year out to go to Hazelbank. So she must be remembered somewhere along the way, and we certainly had 18 years of holidays with her, so I remember her well. And then when she gave up, we had 3 years at the other end of the village on holiday at Stanford, and it was lovely. But we couldn't wait to get back to staying at Sandbraes because it was our end of the village and was much nicer. So that's my little story about Sandbraes, and it was very good.
Thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time.
Thank you, Dave.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.